Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 38. Today we're joined by Sitka Whitetail Ambassador and head guide at Real McCoy Outdoors, Donnie Wilson. We're talking tips for choosing an outfitter, Donnie's two 200-inch deer, and tips for targeting and harvesting mature bucks. So stay tuned. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. As always, I am your host, Clint Campbell, and joined by the one, the only Johnny Utah Mulligan, coming to us hot and live from Iowa. How's it going, man?
What's up, brother? Hot and live in Iowa.
Hot and live from Iowa. That sounds like a Rat record, you know?
Yeah.
It could
that would be the greatest hits album that's played in like the Tilt-A-Whirl at the local fair.
the
dude with the mullet playing with the Happy Trail like Joe Dirt, you know?
Oh yeah, full on, man. Like the Tilt-A-Whirl always had like the best like, just like I always called it butt rock. You know what I mean? Like I don't know why I called it butt rock, but it was like Rat and like Poison and Quiet Riot, like that was all like I called it butt rock, and they always had like the best butt rock music on the planet. Like I would usually just stand at the Tilt-A-Whirl before I would ride it because I can't really ride it because I don't do the rides that do circles. I'll get sick. So I would just sit and like watch, you know, as like friends rode it and just like rock out, you know, which is probably kind of creepy in hindsight. You know, the guy that just stands by the ride.
Well, the fact that you had your bandana tied around your knee and you were playing the air guitar the whole time, putting out the vibe, might have been a little creepy. Maybe. Just saying.
Oozing vibe, man. Just oozing vibe. I haven't been to a good.
That's right.
I haven't been to a good fair in a while, though. Actually, it's I don't know. Like, there's a really good one back home. You know, I would go just about every year, but I don't know that there's one around. I imagine Iowa probably has a pretty good fair.
Yeah, I didn't go to it last year, and I didn't go to it this year. But yeah, it's over. I guess over in Des Moines and Big State Fair. It's supposed to be huge. Like, I think somebody said it's actually the biggest of all the state fairs.
Nice.
So, nonetheless, no, I haven't been to it. I've been to a few of the small town festivals. You know,
right? Yeah,
that's always, you know, pretty decent for a good time and potential good laughs.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I haven't been to one in a while. A little known fact is I actually played with Rat at one point. I shared a stage with Rat.
Sweet.
Let that sink in for a minute. Just let that.
Yeah.
And not to be outdone, I then also shared a stage. I don't know. It might have been in the same month with, Blackie Lawless and Wasp. I shared a stage with them too, which was amazing because the bass player was so drunk that his bass tracks were on backtracks, so his bass wasn't even plugged in. And he
didn't know it.
And he didn't know it. No, and he was just completely rocking out, like just getting it. And like I'm watching, like I didn't realize it at first until like I'm watching him play, and I'm like, man, I was like, how is he, like, he's hammered. I watched him walk on the stage, and, like, they basically had to help him on stage. And I was like, dude, I don't know how that guy's going to play. And he gets up there, and I'm watching. I was like, man, it just doesn't look like he's, like, his timing's right, but everything sounds okay. And I'm, like, looking. And then I see, like, there's nothing plugged in. His wireless pack is turned off, like there's no lights on it, and his hands are completely, like, from the note placements and stuff like that, his hands aren't even making sense with what's being played. And I was like, that's amazing. The guy's just completely out of his mind, but he's rocking out, having a good time. Fans thought he was killing it, so it was all...
That was pre-Milli Vanilli.
Yeah, well, no, man, I'm not that old. This was actually in what year was this? Probably 2005, maybe. I think we played with them. Yeah, we used to play. We played.
Oh.
Yeah, so it was before they were all dead. I don't know if they're dead or if they are dead or not. I might just be saying that and being kind of a jerk, but yeah, it was on one of their many reunion tours of we ran out of drug money. We should probably do another tour. That's probably what that was. So
yeah, I was going to say if they're not dead, if somebody saw him, they're like, wow, look at that old rocker, man. He's like 90 years old and he's still playing. They're like, no, he's 35.
Yeah, he's 35. Yeah. I remember the shocking part was Blackie Lawless was walking out. This is after I saw the super drunk bass player, and Blackie Lawless is walking out, and I'm like, he's walking down the stairs, and he comes over to side stage where I was standing, and he walks up, and I just remember being shocked, and I'm pretty sure like I was staring at him because he's an older fella. He's in like these skin tight leather pants that looked like someone painted them on him, like they were so tight, like they were gonna have to cut him out. And it wasn't a good look, it wasn't like, and I was like, man, hanging on. Like I just looked at my buddy. I was like, man, if I ever hang on like that at some point in my life, just hit me or just put me out of my misery. I was like, cause I don't want to be 65 wearing leather pants. I was like, it's just not a good look. There wasn't nothing going on that was good, but people were eating it up, man. They were loving it. They killed it, and it was a good time. And so I played with Wasp.
Because the same people that were at that fair to see them in 05 also saw them in 82.
Right. Yeah, man. The median age of that concert was old enough to be my grandparents almost at that point.
Yeah.
There were some people that were pretty ate up, you know what I mean? Where I was just like, ooh, like I was looking out into the crowd. You're like, man, I bet in like 79 you were hot, but
and they still think they are.
Oh, yeah.
That's okay. That's all right.
Okay. Hey, man, live your life, let it eat, do what you got to do, man, but those people were loving it. But, so we should probably get on to some deer hunting. I could go on, band, talk for hours of ridiculous stuff that I've seen and heard over the course of time. But I definitely want to get into some whitetail talk and see what has been going on in the timber for you. And then of course I have a story to share, but let's get an update from Iowa first, man. I know that you were just in the timber, hopping out of your stand and to dial in for us to do this quick record. But how was this evening, and how was your days in the timber since the last time we talked?
Well, today was, I should have gone this morning. Looking at the forecast, they were calling for rain through the night, and I woke up in the middle of the night at like 2, and it was getting with it pretty good. It was raining pretty good, and I looked at my phone to look at the update, and they were saying, we're going to have rain through like 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. So I'm like, you know what, turning the alarm off. So turning the alarm off and slept in. Of course, sleeping in for me is like 7 a.m. So when I get up at 7 a.m., it's done raining. And I'm like, seriously? Which, of course, now it's already daylight and, all that kind of stuff. So so I ended up going this evening to the place that I wanted to go this morning. Same wind. Haven't sat that in an evening yet, kind of check it out. But I had a little 3x3 come walking by. To the point I actually had to lean forward over my stand to keep eyes on him as he walked underneath my tree. So that was kind of cool. I don't care if it's a doe, if it's a raccoon, like anytime an animal is a foot off the base of your tree and doesn't know you're there, it's cool,
Yeah, exactly.
So it was just a little buck. Man, there were some does that came out. So tonight was but it was still, uneventful as far as shooters go. But, I was at a trade show doing some Wicked Tree Gear stuff all this past week down in Louisville. What the ATA show is to the bow hunting industry, there's a show called the GIE show, and that would be the equivalent to lawn and garden landscape industry.
Right. So
for anybody that's listening to the podcast that's been to the ATA or seen pictures and video from the ATA, this show makes the ATA look like a flea market. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. That's just the best way to put it, quite frankly. But huge international show, so it was really busy, and it's a big show for us with Wicked. And so I was at that, so I didn't get to do a lot of hunting, but I did go the day before I left for the show. And I did get to see one of my shooters on the hoof at about 150 yards out. And he was in a bean field, and our beans are way brown. They've been brown. Right. And the majority of the bean fields are actually already out. And this bean field is now out. But on Monday, it was still there. So I saw him, and saw a couple other small bucks. I had a 140 class buck that I actually passed at 32 yards. He stood broadside for about 2 minutes at 32 yards in the middle of the bean plot, and I'm like, Yeah,
did you have an internal battle waging?
Last year, my first year in Iowa, sure. A 140, is a great buck. But judged him up, and he was definitely just a 3-year-old, and he needs at least another year to reach maturity, and maybe a couple more years, to see because I do think this deer has good potential. He has really, really long beams. So I think if he can kind of fill in some tine length in there, he's got potential to be a really cool deer. So that was cool to see him, and it was cool to let him go. But yeah, the passing the 135s, 140s, 145s, it is getting easier and easier the longer I'm out here.
Right. Yeah, for sure. What about, so you saw your shooter, have you had him, I guess, let me ask this is the first time you've seen him on stand, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And were you able to get him on trail camera pretty often, or is he a guy that just kind of shows up later in the year?
No, so he's showing up on a new property that I picked up, and there's actually three shooters on there, on that property. And he's one of the three. I ran cameras there all summer and never had a picture of him. And I did my Mrs. Doe P landmine, did a mock scrape, and within 3 hours I had a trail camera picture of him. And I'm like, well, where have you been, all summer, I'm like, how can I get all these pictures of all these deer? And then finally, bam, I get a picture of him. So that always lasts for about 2 or 3 seconds. And then I go back to, well, at least I got a picture of him. I know he's there, and I'm happy. But now that the mock scrapes and other scrapes are opening up and getting more active, now I'm getting pictures of him on multiple scrapes on that property, and a lot more regular. Now, granted, most of my trail camera pictures, are, evening activities. I mean, I am getting some 8 p.m., 9 p.m., but then I'm also getting some 3 a.m. and that kind of stuff. But seeing him on the hoof in daylight hours was super cool.
Nice.
And there's 2 other deer, like I said, that are shooters on that property. And I'm getting pictures of all of them, very, very active, at least once a day. I'm getting them on one or more scrapes.
Nice. That's a good sign.
We'll see how things go. That property has a lot of potential. It does. So far, it's proven to be more of a morning property than an evening property.
Okay.
So we'll see if that continues.
Yeah, and then there should be
a nice I haven't sat my personal property yet at all.
Okay, yeah, I remember we were talking about that, and you said that kind of turns on here later in the year, or later in the season. It sounds like, or at least whenever I was looking at the forecast, I know for around here and heading a little further west toward, Ohio, it looks like this coming weekend that, the classic weekend of the 28th, 29th, getting into the Halloween time, looks like is going to be pretty good with temperatures and stuff like that. Is that kind of holding true for you guys as well?
Yeah, for sure. And one of my big bucks on my personal property is a buck that I called Dalton, going back to my love of the movie Roadhouse. So I've got a Patrick Swayze character named Dalton.
Nice.
And last year he was a solid upper 60s class deer, 4 to 5 last year. So he'll be 5 to 6 this year. And nonetheless, I didn't get pictures of him until October 29th. I had pictures of him all day long. of course, I was hunting another property hard during that time frame, and it was like November 1st that I checked cameras, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, he literally didn't leave my personal property for a full 24 to 36 hours, but and then he cycled back through around November. I think it's November 10th, 11th, and 12th. I had him really, really solid. So maybe he'll do the same thing. I mean, I know what his favorite scrapes were last year. He's the one that created those scrapes, and he was the only person on those scrapes, which was kind of interesting. Yeah. But so anyways, we'll see. I've already got a camera moved into position already over that licking branch, and hopefully he comes back through again. But next week I'm going to this week coming up, I'm going to start venturing over to some public ground. I'm going to start doing some more run and gun stuff here to kind of close out this lull as we get ready to move into some pre-rut activity, which I'm definitely seeing a lot of right now here in Iowa.
Nice. Yeah, for me, it's really weird, man, because I'm usually not done this early in the year, to be honest. So it's a little bit, having to try to get used to what do I do with my weekends and stuff now. Kind of part of me is kind of bummed because I like this hunting this time of year coming up, obviously, like the pre-rut here, even if it's in, PA, and like to try to get back to our farm and stuff like that and spend some time there hunting there. But that's just not going to be in the cards. I'll be headed to Ohio, of course, there the second week so I'll leave in like 2 weeks for Ohio and be there for like 8 or 9 days, which I'm looking forward to. So that'll be like the 4th through the 13th, I think. But, I was lucky enough last week where, I was able to shoot a Pennsylvania 8-point on a small parcel, which was really cool. And, I know everyone, that for those that are following the podcast have heard me talk about the deer Lucky. And I know, John, you and I had talked about him and stuff. And, I had been following him for, 2 years, I guess. And, I kind of alluded to like the idea that I had an epiphany, I guess you could say, or a change of heart, if you will, that Saturday. And it was kind of weird because I was just, I was chasing that deer, and it's the challenge for me is that, I live 3 hours from the property that deer lives on, right? Work a normal guy job. So for me to get back to hunt him, is difficult even whenever there is good weather. But to really hunt him, it's like I have to almost have like the best weather fall on every weekend, which is, it's a crapshoot, right? If it doesn't fall on a weekend, then I usually don't go hunt because I'm not going to go hunt and, blow up a spot on a bad weather day. So I was looking at the forecast, as I was looking at the forecast, of course, I saw him opening weekend because I had a nice cold front come through that opening weekend. And then the cold fronts all kind of landed right around the weekends and nothing on, Friday, Saturday. It was all like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It was usually like the good weather days. And as I kind of like looked at the forecast, it looked like I wasn't going to have a good weather weekend coming up. So I was getting kind of bummed out, of course, and I don't live close to the property where I can hunt them in the evenings and stuff like that, and was getting kind of annoyed. And I was planning to go hunt with a buddy of mine on this small parcel. It was like, it was going to be a little warm, and, it's like I'll go out and I'll hunt there, and that way I'm not blowing up any spots that I really want to hunt later. And my wife had her car in the garage, of course, and so I was dropping her off before I was going to meet my buddy for the evening hunt. And that day was just like a scramble because I was taking care of a bunch of stuff around the house and, got all my stuff packed and got them in the truck and got them over to the dealership. And as I'm driving, I'm like, man, I forgot this, I forgot all my cameras. And my wife she looked at me, she's like, why don't you just go hunt, leave all the crap at home? She was like, don't take any of it. She's like, it stresses you out anyway. She's like, so just go be in a tree stand and just enjoy being in the tree, right? And what I was thinking of that conversation as I was driving out to hunt and was realizing, it's like I'm fortunate that, that I have a bunch of good buddies and, I'm able to have, the podcast and do the podcast with you, and a bunch of my buddies, such as, you are able to, have the flexibility, I guess you could say, that, you might live close to the areas that you hunt, or you live in Iowa, or if you're chatting those guys from Exodus, you live in Ohio and stuff, where part of your job really is to be out there doing it. You know what I mean? And I realized that I was setting an expectation for myself that was almost not achievable, right? Because I wanted to be able to have that same flexibility and kind of the same type of experience, but I live in a completely different state with completely different circumstances. You know what I mean? And I've talked about it before where, I think one of the most important things you can do in hunting is making sure that you set expectations that are reasonable for your circumstances, where you live, the caliber of deer you can hunt, how often you can get out to hunt, and things of that nature. Otherwise, you're going to drive yourself crazy. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's, it's the whole thing of, you see all these big deer on social media and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden you think that, especially if you follow Don Higgins, you think like, man, that guy's killing 200-inch deer in a week. It's like, that must be what I should be doing. And it can really kind of stress you out, you out and bum you out. You know what I mean? And it was getting to that point for me where I was trying to do things that weren't manageable or reasonable, or a reasonable expectation for me. Could I hunt a deer and pattern a deer? Maybe if I find one around here to hunt, sure. You know what I mean? It's like I found one back at the farm to pattern and got on him, and it was going to be a cool hunt if I could actually get back to hunt him often enough, but that just wasn't going to be the case. So as I got out there, I was driving and got to the property and was putting my stand up, and as I was putting my stand up, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to hunt today. And if I see a deer that walks out that interests me and I have a clean shot opportunity, I'm going to take it. I was like, because part of it was I needed to make sure that hunting was still fun for me. You know what I mean? Like it was getting like, I needed to have that fun, just like that, no pressure, being in the stand. And if something makes your heart rate jump, then it's right. You know what I mean? And got in the stand, set up my lone wolf. It was the most crooked setup I've ever set up in my entire life. It was like, the tree was so crooked, the stand was so crooked when I got into it. It was one of those things where you get into the tree and you're just like, I can't believe I set this stand up. And then it was like, am I going to fix it? I'm like, I'm not going to waste my time and fix it. Went to pull my bow up. My bowstring got caught on all my arrows as I pulled them up and ripped out every arrow of my quiver except for one. So I literally had my bow and one arrow in the tree, and the rest of my arrows were laying at the bottom of the stand, or at the bottom of the tree. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I was like, this hunt's going to be a bust anyway. I'm sitting there, and this little buck walks out in front of me, and I'm like, okay, cool. It's kind of like what you were talking about, a deer, or any animal getting that close to your tree kind of gets you excited. Little Spike walks out, and he comes right up underneath me. I ranged him. He's at like 8 yards working this licking branch and scratching himself and just kind of poking around. He looks right at me and didn't see me, and he walked down to this little microplot that I had planted on this property. And this is a 3-acre parcel that butts up to public land in eastern PA. So it's crazy pressure out in that area. A lot of folks go, a season and maybe don't see deer out that way. I'm sitting there, I watch that buck, he goes away, and I saw a doe earlier that I didn't have a shot opportunity at. And I'm sitting there and I hear something kind of scraping or rubbing a tree. It's at least what it sounded like, but the leaves were really wet, so I couldn't really tell. And I just happened to look to my right, and this buck pops out, and he's got, just crap all in his antlers. You know what I mean? Like where you could tell he was raking a tree and was like ripping up some brush and stuff like that. And he's walking around. He's about 20 yards away from me. I didn't have a shot opportunity. I'm sitting there, and my heart kind of got going. He was an 8-point, and I was like, and I just kind of told myself, I was like, this is the guy. I was like, I'm excited. I'm pumped up. I was like, if he gives me a shot opportunity, I'm going to take it. Well, sure enough, he followed the same trail that little buck followed previously. So that little buck gave me a nice little dress rehearsal, for the route that he was going to take. He walked 8 yards in front of me. I drew back, mouth bleeded, stopped him, and put it in his boiler room. He kicked, took off, ran 40 yards, piled up, and went and got him, and had to take care of him kind of quickly because it was warm. But I was pumped, man. It was one of those things where it wasn't really what I thought the Pennsylvania season was going to turn out to be. I had a different set of expectations earlier in the year. But I'm glad I kind of had that conversation with my wife, and she set me straight, because it was an awesome hunt. I had a blast, and was able to take a nice Pennsylvania 8-point on some tough land that land that's hard to tough on a small parcel, butted up against some public land. So I was super stoked, and we have meat in the freezer, and I just bought a meat grinder, so I'm pretty pumped about that. Yeah, that's
awesome, man.
Yeah, so it wasn't what I had planned for the year, of course, but it just felt right, man. I don't know. It was one of those things where it was almost like a relief, which was really weird, that I just kind of was like, you know what, I'm just going to hunt and have fun. And,
sure.
And I think that, I'm not, I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but, I'm not, I guess, the only person that runs into those types of things. I know that there's plenty of other people out there that get frustrated as well. And I guess my unsolicited advice would be is just have fun and hunt what makes you happy and hunt what makes you feel good. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, I mean, that's really why we go out into the timber, right? I mean, it's like if you're not having fun and you're not having a good time, then, I'm not sure why we have the 3:30 a.m. wake up calls and sit in the rain and the cold. And, so that was my way of just kind of making sure that I'm grounded in why I should be doing this or why I do this in the first place.
Yeah. Well, and I know exactly what you're talking about. 2013, I set my heart on a one particular buck and was committed that I said, I'm only going to hunt that deer, and had one encounter with him, but wasn't able to get a shot. For the next couple of days, I panicked, that may be my only opportunity at him and I may never get him. Ultimately I did. 2014, picked a buck, Johnny Cash, one particular deer that I had my heart set on. I ended up killing him on the fourth encounter before I was ever able to get a shot off on him. And I killed him on October 4th, and panic was already setting in. I knew if we got into rut, he was probably going to disappear.
Right.
2015 season, I had 3 encounters with a particular buck. A buck I called Michelangelo, and it was a giant, mega Kentucky giant, and had 3 encounters with him. Didn't get it done. He ultimately did get killed in the rut 3 miles from where I was hunting him. And that was the season where I almost, I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, I really let the stress and the pressure kind of get to me to have my heart set on one particular deer, and obsessed about him. And I get it. Sure, we're always all going to have, there's going to be deer that we're going to try to target, or we're going to pinpoint, or this is a deer that I've got a lot of history with, and it would be really cool to complete the mission, the story, have closure to it.
Right.
That's always going to happen. But, I got into a kind of a funk, and I put a lot of pressure on myself. And even my wife, she said, look, this is getting out of hand.
Right.
This is it is literally destroying you. It's, you've never been like this. This isn't why you hunt in the first place.
Right.
How it doesn't, there is no way that you're actually having fun this season.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm not.
Right.
I was like, I'm not having fun. I was like, I want to kill that deer.
Yeah.
And I had built it up so much to the point where, yes, I wasn't having fun. And the thing that helped me the most was whenever I heard that he got killed, there's the immediate, and, there's the, oh, crap. Oh, screw it. My season's over. I'm done. I'm not even going to hunt anymore.
Right.
But, I snapped out of that, and I'm like, well, my target buck is gone. I haven't actually seen any other deer that I really want to shoot, any mature deer, that I want to shoot. So I was just hunting to hunt, and, was ultimately the deer that I ended up killing that year. I called the new guy because I went and did a card pull on a scrape, and I'm like, hey, who's this buck? This is a new guy. Never seen him before. So his name became the new guy, and I set up in an area where I thought I could intersect him, and I was able to kill him the first time I saw him on the hoof, but he was not a targeted buck.
Right.
So last year, same kind of deal. I had a couple of different deer that I wanted to chase, and of course I set up my tree stands at places that I thought would give me a advantageous, opportunity at those. But no, man, I get what you're saying, and it can wear you out, and it can take the fun completely out of hunting. We're all you're a goal oriented person. I'm a goal oriented person. That's one thing, but to put that much pressure to where hunting doesn't become fun anymore, yeah, it sucks. You know, I've been there, you've been there, and I guarantee 90% of the people listening to the podcast, they've been there at some point in their life with hunting. It happens.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, you know, it was just a nice reminder, you know, of that conversation with my wife of you know, the funny thing was I would have had the best film that I would have ever gotten on a hunt. Like it would have been perfect because he was standing right there in front of me. Like it would have been perfect. But I kind of feel like it's probably part of the reason why he showed up. You know what I mean? It's in some weird hippie kind of way that, you know, it was like one of those things where I was just there to enjoy the moment and be in the moment. And
sure.
You know, and he was presented there to kind of fulfill, you know, that whole, I guess, kind of story. The other cool part of it is that property, it's like I hunted once during late season last year, and I was on the property once this spring. So I really didn't know much about it other than those two kind of walkthroughs. And I picked a good stand location. You know, it's like I went in and I did put a little micro plot in, or my buddy did. I kind of gave him the stuff to do it, and he did the planning and stuff because I couldn't get out to help him. But, you know, I kind of chose where those spots should be, and you know, I knew what tree I needed to be in. I think even, I don't know if I mentioned this to you or not, man, but this is the first year for me that I'm using the Lone Wolf Assault. Before I was using the Climber. And if it weren't for that stand, it's like I would not have been in that tree because there was not one single climbable tree in that whole area. I probably wouldn't have even seen deer that day. You know, but it's just one of those things where that stand just lets me get into pretty much any tree because it's small, lightweight, and you know, easy to set up, and I can kind of get it in between branches if I need to because the base isn't real big. You know, so if it weren't for that, I don't know that I would have even saw that deer because I definitely wouldn't have been in that tree. But yeah, so overall,
well, you know, and that's one of those situations too. Like, and you and I have talked about. You know, I started working with Lone Wolf back in 2013, and I switched over for that purpose. You know, I pick locations that I want to hunt. I don't pick trees that I want to hunt. So fortunately with Lone Wolves, you can get those things in any tree that is there. So you don't have to go tree shopping. You can go tree stand placement shopping instead. Yeah,
exactly. Because I knew what area I wanted to be in. And I just and you know, there were a handful of trees that were there, and all of them were, you know, none of them were going to be anything that was going to be easy to get into. But there was one particular tree is the one I really wanted to be in. That was the one I ended up, you know, putting my stand in. And I ended up only using 3 sticks. And I think I was I might have been 10 feet off the ground, maybe. You know,
sure.
So, and it's kind of a swampy area. So it's, you know, all the foliage around there is about, you know, deer height. Everything's about 4 foot high. So it's a deer's world in that area. Which was nice. But yeah, so the rest of the year, man, I'm just going to kind of use, or, you know, what's left of this portion of the season before I leave for Ohio, I'm going to kind of use this time to do some scouting and just do some observation sits on some of the public land around here and see if I can't start figuring some things out for next year and start putting a game plan together to, you know, to hunt some different areas next year. And I think my goal next year is to hunt even more here on the East Coast versus going back to the farm. Just because it'd be nice to have some, you know, more places close to home that I can get to and hunt without having to drive the distance to get back to the farm. So that, I think, is my goal. My early, you know, 2018 goal is to learn more about some of the public land around here than I do at the moment to have better hunting opportunities in this area. So that is
sure.
That's the plan, man. But if you have any other updates, let's do that. Otherwise, we have Donnie Wilson on the line to talk about some big deer that he's killed. So if we have nothing else to share, let's go ahead and dial him up.
Yeah, and you know, man, it's you know, having a podcast with Donnie. Donnie and I have been super close, good buddies for several years, and I have a feeling that everything we talk about, him and I've probably already talked about at some point today. But it's just, and it's cool to hear it a second time. It's Donnie's one of those guys, man. He doesn't geek out over a lot of technology. Mm-hmm. He keeps it simple. He's a topo guy. He's a bedding area guy. He's hunt the right days, hunt the right times, and you know, hey, go in there, and if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't, and you get to try again. But kind of a no nonsense guy, and I like that about Donnie. But he is a big buck killer.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, we talked about two of his previous ones, and then this, of course, we got on the phone with Donnie, prior to him taking the deer that he took this year, and he took a dandy, an Adams County giant, if you will.
Yep. He can spot them. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I need to get whatever the juju that guy has. I need that to rub off on me a little bit. That'd be nice to get a little bit of that. But without further ado,
no
let's go ahead and get Donnie on the line. Before we get Donnie on the line, let's take a quick moment to hear about our partners at Whitetail Institute of North America. As you all know by now, I've been using Whitetail Institute products for several years, and you've heard me talk about the larger plots I use on our family farm. But today, I wanted to share my experience that I've had with micro plots this past year. This year, I decided to hunt a small 3-acre parcel that is adjacent to a large tract of public land and a farm that doesn't allow hunting. Now, this is also taking place in a super high-pressure area of eastern Pennsylvania. This 3 acres is by and large a transition area for the deer with very little bedding, and this is really the route that they take to and from bed and food. I used Whitetail Institute of North America's bow stand to create a microplot, maybe 20 feet by 20 feet. Bow stand is designed to work in hard-to-reach areas with less than ideal soil conditions and reduced light exposure. This microplot is not intended to be the prime food source, only to slow down visiting deer long enough to provide a shot opportunity, and that is exactly what this plot did this past weekend when I harvested my Pennsylvania buck. He was stopping at a licking branch on the edge of the food plot on his way to his nighttime feeding destination. Products like bow stand are designed to tip the odds in our favor in hard-to-hunt places. If you're hunting areas like this small parcel, then I encourage you to consider tactics like using microplots. And if you'd like to learn more about Whitetail Institute of North America products, visit them at whitetailinstitute.com. And now back to the show. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and today John and I are joined by another friend of John's, a good buddy of his, Donnie Wilson. Some of you may know him from, I've seen some of his work and some of the Sitka gear emails that have gone out. You may notice some ruckus photos of him at outdoor conventions, which looks like the guy's always having a good time at those things. He's obviously a big deer hunter, is the head guide at Real McCoy Outdoors, Sitka Whitetail Ambassador, and from what I can tell, from what John tells me, an all-around good guy, but we'll let that be yet determined during the course of this podcast. But Donnie, thanks for coming on the show, and how you doing this evening?
Doing great. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Super stoked to have you on. I know I've been kind of following you for a while, liking some of your stuff on Instagram and Facebook and so forth. And I have a sense of a little bit of who you are, I guess, just from talking to John and following you a little bit. But for those out there that are listening that aren't quite as familiar with who you are and kind of how you came to kind of get involved in the outdoor industry, if you wouldn't mind, give us a little bit of background about yourself, where you're from, how you started hunting, and what you do for a living.
Well, what I do for a living, I own a concrete company here in Dayton, Ohio. I got started hunting, like most people, with my father. We started hunting down in Kentucky on a family farm. I kind of started bow hunting on my own. My dad wasn't a bow hunter. So I like the challenge of the bow hunting, so I turned to bow hunting. Got kind of lucky on a big deer, and that big deer turned me into a big deer hunter. And I've done that for 25 years now. Killed a couple good deer, really good deer. Started guiding, kind of based on that. Some people started talking about me, and guy asked me if I wanted to guide for him, so I did that for a few years. And stayed in touch with the guys at Real McCoy over the years, and then I started guiding for those guys. Now I'm their head guide. I've been their head guide. This is the 5th year I've been their head guide. We hunt, I think the McCoys own about 10,000 acres. We hunt about 3,000 to 4,000, and we lease the other properties. Okay. We stay pretty busy, and we do pretty good on big deer in Ohio.
Nice. So what part of Ohio is that in?
We hunt Adams County, Ohio.
Adams County. And so just for those out there listening that might not be as familiar with the geography, is that extreme southern Ohio?
Yeah, South Central, like right in the middle of the state, South Central.
Nice. Yeah, they definitely have some good deer down in that area. I think this year might be the first year that I make a trip close to that region. I've hunted usually up around the Conshohocken kind of area in the past, but this year I might venture a little further south. That's some rugged terrain down there, man. You got some pretty nasty pools as far as hills are concerned.
Yeah, it's kind of split in like 50-50. Like the western part of the county is pretty flat and agriculture, and then you get to the eastern part, and man, it is rough country for Ohio. It's rough country for anywhere. It's steep, hilly, but there's a lot of timber, and we feel that rough country gives these big deer a place to grow old, and geez, you just never know what's going to walk out down there.
Right, and that's the one thing I think that I noticed. Just I spent a little time this summer in that kind of region, scouting a little bit, and that was the one thing that the buddies I was hanging out with were kind of telling me that it's big timber. You may not see, at least where this is public ground, of course, that I'm talking about as far as where I'll be headed possibly this year. But it was like you're not going to get run over with deer necessarily. He was kind of explaining to me. He was like, but he said he's rarely been to a place that kind of supported the type of age structure that he was seeing in there. And I think you're exactly right. It's just that rough terrain. It's like, I'm not quite sure who would want to make some of those hikes in the morning or take a late evening shot to try to do a track and drag out in some of that country. So I can definitely see how those deer get age on them in that region for sure.
Yeah, that's totally it. There's just places where you're not going to go, and deer will go there, and they can hide out and grow old. We kill 7 and 8 year old deer sometimes. Old deer, and that's the main thing. To grow big deer, they got to be old.
That's right. Yeah. I don't know that I've ever seen a 7 or an 8 year old deer. This year is the first year actually in our PA farm that I do some just habitat management with my family and stuff there. This year I'm after a 4-year-old, and it's the first 4-year-old I can ever remember having on the farm. Pennsylvania is pretty notorious for having 2.5-year-old and maybe a 3.5-year-old if you're lucky. But so I'm pretty excited for this year to be able to chase a 4-year-old. But this time of year, being a guide, and like of course you mentioned, you own your own company and so forth. What does your schedule look like this time of year? Like, how do you balance owning your own company, being the head guide at Real McCoy Outdoors, and I know you're a big family guy too, just from following you on social media and stuff like that. How do you manage to pack all that in this time of year?
I have zero time. My calendar's full. My days are busy at work, and my weekends are full with soccer, and then trying to get this deer hunting thing up and running. October's probably my busiest month. We get super busy at work. Everybody's trying to get everything done before winter, and then we get busy down there at the McCoys, trying to get everything ready for the hunters. And soccer and basketball kind of conflict. Mm-hmm. So it is busy. It's a busy time of year.
Right. Now, are you spending this time of year, are you in the timber a ton for the guiding service, or has your work kind of been done and you're just kind of waiting for the hunters to show up to camp now?
Yeah, we have a lot done by this time. Most of the stands, we'll go around at the end of the year and loosen straps on the stands, and then we check the stands, but they're all up. Shooting lanes are cut. We may have to touch up here and there, but most of that stuff's already taken care of. We'll run some trail cameras. We don't run a ton of trail cameras. We do run some, but so most of the work's done, I would say.
Right. So I think one of the things, I think one of the I guess misconceptions or misperceptions of the outdoor industry just in general is a lot of people think that you work in the outdoor industry and it must be it's a cool job, no doubt, I'm sure, but I think they think that you spend most of your time hunting and doing those types of things. I think John gave me a word of advice at one point, was like, if you really want to spend time hunting, don't work in the outdoor industry. But what I think people, when they think of guides, it's like this glamorous job where you're spending all your time putting guys on stands, and that's mainly the work that's going into it, is that type of work. But give us a kind of a little bit of insight into what all goes into being a guide. I'm sure there's a lot more than meets the eye and a lot more than most people probably think. So, what's the preseason work that you have going on? Like whether it's you're targeting specific deer to kind of get familiar with how deer are moving or where deer are bedding. Like, so what's a day look like for you in the preseason?
Well, guiding is definitely not a glamorous job. It's, when I first started guiding, I did it for a couple years, and that outfitter would not let me hunt while I was guiding. And, I did it for a couple years and decided that was not for me.
Right.
Because you just don't get to hunt. If you like hunting, you definitely don't want to be a guide because you're not going to get to hunt.
Right.
Maybe some big game guides, they're not necessarily hunting, but they are on the guides. But I don't go to the stand with the guys. I might take them and drop them off or show them to a stand, but I don't sit on stand with the guys. So, right. I don't get to hunt with the guys. The McCoys, I do get to hunt. That's part of what I get paid is properties to hunt.
Right.
My normal day, we are allowed to bait in Ohio, so we do a lot of corning, checking trail cameras, moving stands, all of what you think you would do. That's what we're doing. The toughest part about guiding is dealing with different personalities. You have to figure out who you're working with, what they're looking for, what their expectations are. That's the toughest part is just different people's personalities.
Right. I would think one of the really difficult, situations or things to manage is just someone who comes in with maybe a miscalculated expectation. And, I'm sure you've encountered this, with someone getting upset where they didn't see the type of deer they wanted to see and so on and so forth. Have you run into those types of situations?
Oh, all the time. I mean, guys come in for a 5-day hunt. The main thing to think about and remember is there's nothing more than I want than to put you on a deer that you want to kill.
Right.
That's my main focus. It's not like I'm going to hold something back. I may hold a stand back for a couple of days if the weather's going to change, if I think you have a better chance. If I am holding a stand back, it's because I think you're going to have a better chance later on in the week. So I'm all about putting people on big deer, but, you only have 5 days. And to think that you're going to come in to any outfitter in the country and kill something over 150, that's pretty high expectations. 150 is a big deer. It's probably in the top 20% of deer in the country. So if we're 25% success in camp, we're beating the odds.
Right.
So, it's tough.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why they call it hunting too. It's there's definitely nothing's a sure shot. That's for sure. And 150-inch deer, man, that's you're right. I mean, it's a huge deer. And I think sometimes, people get caught up in maybe some stuff they see on TV or social media or whatever and start to get, a little bit of warped expectations of what big deer are. You know what I mean? Like, you see a lot of folks, posting things, whether, whatever size the deer is, but they're usually giant deer. And you think that that's what the bar is, and it's just not the case. It's like those are the exceptions and not the rule, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
For sure.
And, it's always,
I mean, the minimum Pope and Young typical is 125.
Mm-hmm.
If that doesn't say anything, a 125-inch deer, that's a decent size 8-point. That's a pretty good size 8-point.
Right.
And that's the minimum record book Pope and Young entry is 125. So, 150 inches that's a big deer.
Yeah. I in Ohio last year, I took a Pope and Young, and I was tickled with that deer. It was the biggest deer I ever killed. So I couldn't imagine another, whatever it was, 20 more inches on top of the one that I shot. That would have I may have had to spend a little bit more time in the stand to collect myself before I got down after that, possibly.
Yeah.
But if someone out there listening was considering looking into hunting with an outfitter, what type of advice or things would you say that they should consider when kind of choosing one? Like, what are those kind of criteria you would think that they should be looking into?
I mean, you got to look at success, obviously. Mm-hmm. But some outfitters inflate that. They're gonna include sightings as success, not just shot or kills. Some outfitters will say shot opportunities. They're running 50% of shot opportunities, but who's to say that's their shot opportunity or your shot opportunity? Right. Look at actual kills. That we've taken this many deer, we've had this many hunters. I'm a big fan of small outfitters. I don't like the big outfitters that are running 300 or 400 or 500 guys a year. It's tough to put guys on deer. Even if you have 15,000 to 20,000 acres, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. I don't want to put down other outfitters, but it's tough to consistently put people on big deer when you're running that many guys. It's just a nightmare trying to run that many stands. You have to run 1,000 stands. It's just tough. I think we have nearly 60 stands throughout our 3,000 to 4,000 acres, and the most we hunt per week is 8 guys. Mm-hmm. So we got 60 stands with 8 guys, and we're trying to keep guys on fresh stands and give these guys the best opportunities. But if you're running 200 or 300 guys, let's say you have 30 or 40 guys in camp a week, it's a nightmare trying to get that many guys on deer.
Right.
I would say, look at how many people they're taking. Look at their success rate on kills. Ask for references. Call people that hunt. Tell them that you want references from guys that did not kill. Right. Everybody's going to say, if they killed a 150-inch deer, they're going to say, yeah, it was the best hunt I've ever been on. But the guy that I'm trying to make happy is the guy that doesn't kill. Like, I want that guy saying, you know what, I didn't kill, I had a great time, and those guys did everything they could to put me on a big deer, and I would go back based on that. That's what I want to hear.
That's interesting. So how many, I'm just curious, like, do you guys run, or outfitters typically in general, do you run the entire season, like from opening day to closing day of archery, and then maybe you open again for muzzleloader, or there's select weeks that you're looking to put guys in stands and that's really it during the course of the season?
It varies by outfitter. Mm-hmm. We don't start hunting until the 3rd week of October. Okay. Our season comes in this weekend, so the end of September, our bow season does, and it doesn't go out until the end of January. We'll start hunting 3rd week October. We'll run up until Thanksgiving, and then we have a week-long shotgun season that's the week after Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. But after that, we don't do much until late season. There's a late muzzleloader. If we have some guys that are really wanting to come and bow hunt late season, we may do a few guys, but we don't push a lot of guys through late season.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, because I would think that, some of those early weeks, unless you have, like, for instance, this weekend where you have a cold front that's coming through, it's probably not worth, may not be worth the time putting guys in stands during that time. I would suspect, just as a normal hunter wanting to try to find the best conditions you possibly can to get on stand, it seems like the later you would wait, obviously, is going to give you the better opportunities and get guys in stands where they can sit all day versus sitting just in an evening set.
Absolutely.
So one of the questions I had for you was, I know you mentioned that as part of your gig, you get an opportunity to hunt some of those, the property that you're helping guide on and so forth. But how much, with all the stuff that you have going on with your company and, the guiding and of course, family time and stuff like that, like how much are you actually getting out during the season to hunt, would you say?
Well, with my company, I'm on site until the third week October, and then I've kind of structured my workload where I can leave. My guys can usually get a hold of me via phone or text if they have questions, but I'm able to leave. They still work. So I'm able to get away. The guiding kind of holds me up a little bit on hunting, but if I have a tag in my pocket, that's my main focus is I want to kill a deer. Right. So that's why I do everything I do. That's why I started my company. I started a concrete company because I would get fall off. That's why I did it.
Right.
That's why I guide. That's why I do mostly everything I do.
Right. Yeah. I gotta look into one of those seasonal type of gigs like that. I think because for me, it's tough. I work the normal 9 to 5 grind of being in an office, and my weekends are really obviously when I get my action. But in Pennsylvania, there's no Sunday hunting, so it's oftentimes during the course of a week. It's like I might get a day in, which just doesn't do it. I think my takeaway to this is I should start a concrete company of some sort. It sounds like that's more.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's nice. I mean, I have the luxury of hunting when I think is best. Right. Like, I went and checked some trail cameras today. I didn't have any deer coming in daylight. I'm probably going to go to some state land somewhere and hike in and just kind of hope to get lucky.
Right. Yeah.
Like I know some good state land, and I've killed a big deer on state land. I've done it before, and it can happen. So I'll save some of my farms for when it gets right. I just won't hunt them.
Right. Yeah. I take a similar approach where it's I live near Philadelphia is where I live now. And I'll often hunt state land around here. And a buddy of mine has a small property, like a super small, almost like suburb parcel. It's like 3 acres, but it butts up against state ground. And I'll hunt that sometimes as well. But whenever the weather gets right, so usually when I'll try to go back to our family farm and just do minimal sits on that farm to see if I can't kill a deer that I'm after specifically. And then of course I spent some time in November in Ohio, but there was a nice segue because I wanted to ask you is, I know that you had mentioned you get to hunt the property or the farms that you're helping to, or that you're guiding on, but do you hunt a mix of, it sounds like you hunt a mix of private and public land. And, what would you say that split is? Are you hunting predominantly private or predominantly public? What do you say there?
These days I'm 90% private. Okay. I'll go into some state land here and there. Just if I don't think one of my farms is right, I may go hunt some state land, or if I can't find a place to hunt on my private farms, I'll go hunt some state land. I'm not opposed to it. But 90% of my hunting's done on private land now.
Right. Now, do you approach both of those differently, or do you approach them the same as far as like tactics and how you kind of do your recon and scouting and stuff like that, or do you approach them differently?
It's definitely different.
Yeah.
State land, I'm trying to get away from people. I mean, it's similar but different. The private properties I hunt big timber. I don't hunt fields. It's just the properties that I'm dealt, which I like. I like the big timber down there. We've talked about that, the rough country and the big timber, and old deer. So I kind of just leave those properties alone until they're right, until I get a deer show up on camera, or I know that it's going to be a good day if a cold front comes through. I leave those properties alone. State land, I will try to do what I say, go in the back door. Like if I think the deer are coming back onto state land from some agricultural property, I'll try and maybe walk in a mile or 2 miles from the other side to catch them coming in from the private ground. I've done that for years. Mm-hmm. So the state land, I try to just go far enough where I'm getting away from everybody, where nobody's been, and that's probably why I'm thinking about going this weekend, opening morning. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure nobody's been where I'm thinking about going.
Right. So do you ever run, or have you in the past, I guess, run trail cameras on public ground, or do you just mainly rely on, reading maps and boots on the ground and just historical knowledge to kind of put you in the right position, or the right tree, or the right saddle, or the right bench, whatever the case might be? Before we hear how Donnie uses trail cameras, let's take a quick break to hear about our partners at Exodus Outdoor Gear. Does trail camera theft got you down this season? How about trail camera failure or poor battery life? Head over to ExodusOutdoorGear.com and use the promo code TRUTH and save $20 on a trail camera, and let Exodus be the cure to your trail camera ailments. Visit ExodusOutdoorGear.com. And now back to the show.
I've ran some trail cameras on state land. I've had trail cameras stolen on state land.
Yeah.
I don't run trail cameras on state land anymore. It's people just steal. If they see a stand or see a trail camera, they're going to steal it. It's just crazy to me that it's just like an open invitation. If you find it, you're going to take it. It's crazy. Yeah. So I use maps. I have probably 50 paper maps down in my basement that I've had for years. And now obviously I use an app on my phone. I hunt saddles, I hunt ridges, I hunt deep draws. I just try and find somewhere on state land where I think the deer are going to cross, or they're going to be walking, or like I said, kind of coming in back door where I can catch them coming back in.
Right. Yeah, it's like I kind of followed the Donnie Wilson method there last year. It seemed like, where I went into an area that was just no one else was going to go. It was just a steep, nasty climb through a bunch of briars, and there was a drainage in between at the top of this ridge, and essentially created a nice little pinch point too, between some really kind of almost impenetrable brush and where the drainage started down the side of the mountain. And that's kind of where I parked myself. And those couple things, like that terrain feature with the fact that no one else was going to hike there to hunt that, I had deer all over me all day whenever I was headed back to camp, and guys were talking about not seeing any deer, and I was run over with bucks from the time like daylight broke to basically the time it got dark. And I think it was just all for, kind of doing what you were saying, which was just getting rid of people, or getting away from people. Sometimes you like to get rid of them too, but just to get away from people and looking for that terrain feature that's going to help funnel those deer, give you an opportunity to at least see them, and if you're lucky enough, then get a shot opportunity. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, was one, maybe both, but it was one of the 200-inch deer that you've killed, was one of those on state ground?
Yeah, one of them was on public ground. It was on national forest property, actually.
Okay. And was the second one, was that on private?
That was on private, yep. Okay. So the first one was on private, the second one was on public.
First one was on private, second one was on public. Okay. So I'm curious, like, so I guess let me start by asking this. Were either of those deer, were you targeting either of those, or was it one of those situations where you knew that there was a big deer in the area and you were just kind of relying on going to places where you thought you would have an opportunity to see movement, or was it a situation where you knew specifically there is this guy that's living here and I think this is where his bedroom's at and I think this is how he's going to use this property?
Well, neither of the deer, I didn't know either one of the deer were there.
Okay.
But the private property, we stayed completely out of it. We know big deer there. We've seen big deer there. We see them every year. We stay out of it until the first day I hunted it that year was November 2nd. I killed that deer. And then the public land, same thing. I know big deer there. I've seen big deer. The first time I went in was October 17th and killed him on October 17th. But both places, first time I was in there that year.
That's interesting. So so October 17th, so that's kind of in that gray area that people would consider not great time to hunt, right? The October lull, right? So is there any, do you have any, I guess, Donnie Wilson tips to hunting the October lull? Is there anything that you like to do during that course of the year that you feel gives you better opportunities, things aside from, making sure that you're hunting the right weather and things of that nature, but is there anything that you like to hunt or like to kind of target in on during that portion of the year?
I definitely like to hunt after some sort of cold front. Okay. And I would hunt someplace, that time of year I would hunt someplace that you're probably not going to hunt during the rut just because you're saving your better spots. I like the state land. Like I'm a big fan of hunting state land, getting way back in there that time of year, just because if you do screw up a deer, or if you screw up that area, if you leave a bunch of scent in that area, it doesn't really matter, because you probably aren't going to go back there and hunt it again.
Right.
So just, save your better spots, wait for a good cold front to come through, and go in there and hunt. Just take a chance. That's what I did that time. And, I've seen big deer in there. I've hunted that. It's probably a 500, 700 acre tract of national forest, and I've hunted it for years. And I've seen big deer in there. I know they're in there. I don't really necessarily need to put a trail camera unless I want to see a picture of a buck. It's nice to see pictures of bucks, but I'd rather put a buck on the wall than have a picture of a buck.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just one of those places where you just stay out of until it gets right. The state lands, you can go in there, do your thing. If you don't kill, well, you had a great hunt. You got to go hunting. You didn't kill. You may have screwed up a deer. A deer may have walked, 200 yards downwind of you, winded you. You never even seen him. Right. So it's not going to hurt you to hunt those kind of places that time of year and save your better spots for the rut.
Right. Now, do you typically like to sit all day? Do you like, that time of year, are you an all day sit guy? Or are you hunting mainly evenings? Or what's your policy whenever it comes to, sitting morning, evening, or all day?
It's really dependent on the weather. Okay. Like if it's one of those days where the deer are moving, I'm going to sit all day.
Right. No matter what time of year?
No. It has to be during the rut, or I'm not sitting all day.
Okay.
Like some guys will, I won't. But if it's prime time and the weather's what I think it needs to be, I have zero problem sitting all day.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things I think I learned the lesson of was during the rut. I typically for a while was a morning sit kind of guy, and then I would get out of the stand and I'd maybe change stand locations if I wasn't getting in the action early, and then I would sit somewhere else in the evenings. And last year it was funny because when I was younger I used to sit all day, and then last year I decided, I was like, I'm just rut, I'm gonna sit all day in the same stand morning to dark and just see what happens. And I saw more deer than I had seen in probably the past 3 years combined, in those handful of days, and that kind of resold me on parking my keister in the stand all day during once the last week of October hits. And because it was funny because I just had some friends that telling me, they were like, you'll be surprised the size of the deer that you'll see from about 11:30 to 2 o'clock. And he just kept kind of joking with me. He's like, that's when giants get dropped. And he was like, you'll find those midday cruisers. He's like, if you just sit in the stand. And so I took his advice and it paid off for me. So he made me a believer, that's for sure. But
I have a theory on 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock a.m. I think a lot of times the does will go bed. They'll finish feeding. They'll go to bed. Usually that's 9, 10 o'clock. Mm-hmm. I think bucks know that as well. And I think bucks kind of travel between 10 and 12 o'clock looking for those does that are bedded. They'll kind of move in between these bedding areas and try and bump these does up to see if they're ready.
Right.
So I think that 10 to 12 o'clock during the rut is just awesome. I think it's really good.
Yeah, that was when I saw a lot of the activity last year, for sure. And then I ended up arrowing mine about 1:30, but I had a couple deer in right around that 10 to 12 o'clock. We might have to call that the Donnie Wilson 10 to 12 theory. We'll patent that.
I like it.
So going back to those 200-inch deer that you harvested. So, I have no experience with that caliber of deer, just being completely honest. But I've heard guys that have killed deer, in that realm, sometimes a little smaller or whatever, but just call them giant deer, that change the way that they think or the way that they hunt. So I guess my question here is there something that either of those deer taught you that changed the way that you hunt today? Was there something that you picked up by watching them? I know it was the first set, if I'm not mistaken, that you mentioned that you killed both of those, but was there anything that you learned or that you took away from those experiences that changed the way that you approach hunting now?
Good question. I think over the years, I've evolved a little bit. I'm a huge fan of no pressure. So I think that the first 200-inch deer I killed, I know we killed that deer because there was zero pressure in there. Mm-hmm. And I started using that more and more. And then, I killed that deer on public land, and I'm pretty sure that nobody had been where I was. So I'm pretty sure we killed that by no pressure. So I won't say that those two deer specifically taught me that, but they definitely brought that out. Like I've started using that more and more and more and more, and I think zero pressure is the way to get it done.
Right. So when you say zero pressure, you're talking about like keeping it a fresh stand until the time is right, the weather's right, until the things all kind of line up to where you're like, these are the best conditions I'm going to get to sit this stand.
Yes. Yeah. And watching the wind, and I found a deer today. It's probably 160 inches, something like that. He's coming in at 9 o'clock in the evening. I'm not going to hunt that deer until late October, early November. I won't go in there. I'm going to keep taking some corn in there and checking the trail cameras about every 2 weeks, something like that, and just kind of watching what he's doing. I'm not going to bump him out of there. I'm not going to sit in the stand. Every place that I put a trail camera, I can get to pretty easy without any pressure on the area itself. Like, I'm not going to go walking through the woods. They're usually within 100 yards of where I park my truck. It's something where I can get in and out really easy. And every time I go check that trail camera, I'm taking some corn in there with me, some kind of reward for me going in there. So if they do smell me, there's a whole fresh pile of corn for smelling my scent. They're getting a reward for smelling me being in there.
Right.
So I just, stay out of there.
Right. That's interesting, the whole corn scent kind of approach, where it's almost like Pavlov's dogs, where it's like they get conditioned to smell your scent and know that it's dinner time. Because I know that, that of course that study was done with dogs and salivating when they heard a dinner bell or whatever. But you could even say even bears. I know when you go to Alaska, bears, when they hear a gunshot, like Kodiak Island, for example, are conditioned to know that gunshot means there's a fresh kill on the ground, so they'll start moving towards gunshots. So the deer are kind of doing the same thing, where it's like that scent is telling them that, hey, the dinner bell has rang. There is a fresh pile of corn here that Donnie had left us. There's no danger there except getting full. So let's go ahead and head over.
That's exactly right. I've been bait bear hunting up in Maine a few times, and those guys, when they bait that barrel, they bang on the barrel with the bucket that they brought the bait in. You climb up in your stand, and as soon as you hear that truck drive away, that bear's at the bait. I mean, there is no doubt they know what's going on.
Nice. So you had mentioned the wind there just a few moments ago, and I'm always curious about how guys use the wind or don't, because I've heard different guys have different theories on it. Some guys absolutely have to have the wind in their favor 100%. Some guys are hunting what some will refer to as an off wind or a crosswind or whatever, where it's almost wrong for you as the hunter, and almost right, 100% right for the deer to get him in position. And then there's some guys I talk to, especially, this is why I'm interested to get your opinion on this, that are hunting, really kind of mountainous, kind of rugged terrain, hilly country. That, one of the guys I talked to, he's like, I don't pay attention to wind at all because it swirls so much. He's like, if I paid attention to wind, he's like, I'd never be in a stand. And so he just kind of relies on his scent control 100% to try to get him close enough to get a shot opportunity. So what's your theory on the wind? How do you usually like to play it?
I definitely pay attention to the wind. I try to hunt the right wind. I try to be in the right stand for that wind. When you're in the mountains, down there in southern Ohio, it's hilly, it's rough. So you definitely get some swirling winds. One thing that I really pay attention to is thermals. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm going to hunt low in the morning and high in the evening. Mm-hmm. Like, if I got a killer spot to hunt that's down in a deep draw, the only time I'm going to go there is in the morning. And, when the sun comes up, thermals are going to start rising. That's going to help you. If you try to hunt that in the evening, every deer in the country is going to smell you.
Right.
So I try to hunt the right wind. Obviously, it's going to swirl, but like when I'm talking about corn and hunting, where I'm hunting, I'm dumping corn. I don't hunt right over the corn. I hunt, 50 to 80 yards downwind of that area.
Right.
Every mature deer that knows that corn's there, they are dang sure going to walk downwind before they walk into that corn.
Right.
So, I'm going to hunt as far downwind as I can and think, still possibly get a shot. So,
right.
The wind is super important. I mean, the swirling, obviously you got to take some chances. I do like that off wind. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if you have the perfect wind, I think it's perfect for the deer too. Like if they go downwind, they gotcha, So I think when the deer thinks it's safe, but that wind's just off just a little bit and you're inside that off, I think that's your best chance. Mm-hmm. But if it's straight downwind and you're not far enough downwind, they're going to get you. Deer, big bucks will circle downwind 200 yards sometimes. I've had deer blow at me, 400 yards away. If a deer gets downwind of you, it's game over. They're going to win. Like, I'm pretty particular with my scent control, but even that, they win. They're good at it.
Yeah, there's a reason that they stay alive and get age
That's
on
right.
If there's a big one. It's not by being foolish,
Yep.
I think one of the things too is I try to do in some of the hilly countries, I try to put something between me and the downwind side, like to make it almost impossible or extremely difficult for them to get in that position to try to win me. Whether that's like, sitting up against some really nasty brush, it's just going to be difficult for them to get through, or sitting up against, some type of, near like a cliff edge or something like that, where it's just going to be hard for them to get into position to bust me. That of course isn't always an option, but that's always, something that folks out there listening can look for, is try to find something that's impenetrable by the deer to get through to get in that position to win you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm always curious how guys, approach, preparing for the season. Some guys, I know you'd mentioned that you do run some trail cameras. You're not running any on public ground, for the reasons of theft and so forth. But, some guys are more interested in, putting boots on the ground and cutting tracks, reading sign and things of that nature. What's kind of your approach to harvesting a mature buck? Like, if you could just kind of walk me through, if you're put on a new property, or if you're going out to kind of take a look at, say, your outfitter has now kind of expanded maybe its land, and they need you to kind of go out and take a look and survey and try to get some ideas of maybe where some good stand locations would be. How would you kind of approach that? What would be your steps to kind of dissect that?
Well, it would definitely depend on when we got the new property. If we got the new property in September and we're going to try and hunt it in October, I'm probably going to wait until it's raining really hard to go in there and walk around. I'm going to look at a ton of maps. I'm going to look at all the terrain features. I'm going to look at aerials. If I do want to go in there, I'm going to wait till it's pouring down the rain. Right. If we pick up the property in January, I'm going to wait till February or March, and I'm going to go in there and walk every inch of it, and I'll figure out the deer. It all boils back down to that, no pressure. If we're going to hunt it soon, if I hike and scout the property in the rain, I'm not going to leave any scent in there. I may bust a deer out, but they're really not going to know what's going on, and I don't think it bothers them as much to see somebody as it does to smell somebody.
Right.
I think when a deer smells you, they know exactly what it is. When they see you, they're not quite sure. I don't think it bothers them as bad. Even if you jumped them out of their bed, if they didn't smell you, I don't think it would bother them as bad.
Right. So when you're checking out your maps for this new hypothetical property here, what type of features exactly are you looking for? Like, what really draws, I guess, your attention? Like, if you're looking at a new property with fresh set of eyes and you're going to check out the map, like, what are the things that really kind of send off, bells and whistles for you?
I'm going to look at the top of a map first thing, and if it's rough country and big timber, that's what I'm going to look at first. Obviously, if there's fields, I'm going to look at an aerial first. If it's topo, I'm looking at where I would walk if I was going to walk that property. Like, am I going to walk up that steep hill right there, or am I going to walk down that ridge? I'm going to look at where there's a saddle. If I want to go from this draw to that draw, where's the lowest spot? Where's the easiest spot for me to cross? That's what I'm looking for when I'm, looking at topos. I'm looking for the easiest spot for these deer to walk, because they're just like us. They're going to walk whatever's easiest. That's probably what they're going to do.
Yeah, the path of least resistance. It's funny because you think these animals, are built for the country, right? But when it comes down to it, they still are looking for, the path of least resistance to get from point A to point B. It's funny. I just spent some time out west hunting, and you're in all kinds of rugged country out there, and those animals, of course, are built for it, but they're the same. It's like if they have an easy way to get from point A to point B, they're going to take it. The less calories that they have to spend, the less energy they have to spend, the less food they have to worry about trying to consume, which helps them prolong their life. So it's all about survival, and so whatever they have to do to survive. So that's interesting. The way you kind of look, I guess, at the maps. I guess it was maybe 3 years ago is when I really actually started looking at maps. Maps still to this point confuse me a little bit. I'm getting better at reading them, but once I started being able to understand reading the maps, I started seeing more deer immediately. It's kind of crazy how that kind of played that big of a role in changing my, I won't say my hunting success, but at least my encounters. It was probably the biggest game changer for me, was starting to understand like the different features and what they look like on a map, being able to kind of dissect that before I put boots on the ground, especially for anybody who's going to hunt out of state. Doing your online scouting or your map scouting before you get there is a huge help.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'm going to look at is an aerial, right? What kind of foliage do we have? Is it all timber? Is there fields? How much field? How much timber is there? That's what I'm going to look at. I'm going to look at the aerial. The second thing I'm going to look at, I'm going to pull up a topo, and then once I know the foliage, I'm probably just going to study that topo. Mm-hmm. Like I'm a huge fan of topos. They unless it's super flat ground, that terrain is going to kind of tell you where these deer are going to move. Unless they're walking in foliage, then they're going to hug that timber or whatever's there to stay hidden. But if it's just terrain that's moving them around, it's going to move them around in certain areas, that's for sure.
Right. And then those things are probably pretty reliable historically. It's like once you kind of figure that out, and if it's the terrain that's moving them, then it should work year over year in terms of how they're going to kind of move through a property. So long as, food sources change, of course, throughout the course of the year, and things change throughout the season, that being taken into consideration. But by and large, they should kind of use the property year over year in a similar way, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, like I said, most of our stands are set year in, year out. We use the same stands. I mean, we may change one or two stands here and there, flip a stand, or, if we're getting some more sightings 100 yards that way, and it's happened a couple times, we may move a stand. But most of our stands are set, and they're set mostly on terrain. Like, we don't hunt a ton of fields at the McCoys. We hunt mostly woods, and we get it done at the McCoys. We've killed some big deer down there.
Nice. Yeah, I've seen some of the pictures. I 100% agree with you there. So, do you hunt? I'm curious here about this question too, because I know that the two big deer that we were talking about earlier, the 200-inch deer, that you killed both of those on the first set. But it sounds to me like, and tell me if I'm off the mark here, but it sounds to me like you you're patient whenever it comes to picking your time to hunt, but it sounds like whenever that time hits, like you're aggressive and you have no problem kind of going and diving right into the area where you think the best opportunity is when the conditions are right, that you don't kind of leave the chips to play later necessarily. When you get the right conditions and you know you have a deer that's in the area, you're in the prime spot. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it is. I won't necessarily go deep into a property. Like, I'll kind of hunt the outskirts, but where I'm hunting, I know I'm going to see the deer. I think you can screw up by going too deep. Like, I'll go deep on state land because I don't care if I screw up that 2 miles that I'm walking in. It doesn't matter to me. But if I'm hunting, I have one property that's 200 acres. It's all timber, but all my stands are within 200 yards of the road. You know, I don't go in that deep because I don't want to bump deer. Like, I want to be able to sneak in, sneak out. If I got a trail camera in there, I want it to be easy to get to, or I'm not leaving a bunch of scent going in there. Less pressure, the better. So I will hunt those properties, and I'll hunt them. You know, if I have 2 or 3 good days that I think is really good, I'll hunt. I don't mind hunting a stand 3 days in a row if I think it's good. If the wind's right, I think the weather's right, I think the deer are on their feet, I don't mind hunting that 2 or 3 days in a row. But I won't go walking in to a place and bump a bunch of deer.
Right. So you're still kind of using, even though you're still kind of using an inside out kind of method when you're hunting. And I'm supposing, like, as the season goes on and we get closer to that pre-rut, and that rut timing is when you'll really start to kind of maybe intrude more to the center or deeper into the property. Is that right?
Yeah. There's certain days that if we have a good rain and overnight, and I know the next morning it's going to be good, I have a couple stands that are farther in the property on ridge lines that I wouldn't normally hunt, but I know they're great areas. But I'll wait for it to rain overnight so that I can kind of slip into those spots a lot quieter. I do that every so often, but not a lot. Like those stands, I mean, there's one stand that I hunted one day last year. I just don't like to go deep just because a lot of times you're doing more harm than good.
Right. The one thing you mentioned a second ago is something, I guess, that I kind of learned or put into action, I guess, last year. And I heard more and more guys kind of talk about it, or, you know, I was always kind of using the philosophy that I would rarely hunt a stand more than once. And I guess it was Steve Bartilla, actually, I heard talking about, you know, what you had just said, which was like, you know, being okay to hunt the same stand multiple sets, you know, days in a row, so long as that stand is still what you would kind of perceive to be clean, right? You know, his kind of motto was, and it sounds like you're kind of saying something similar there, where it's like, if deer didn't smell you, deer didn't see you, deer didn't hear you, don't know that you were ever in that stand, well, then it's kind of like, hear no evil, see no evil. There was nothing there. You know, and so then in that kind of scenario that you can hunt the same stand multiple times. And I used that method last year, and that's what helped me, I think, have success. Is that kind of like your same approach? It's like, if that stand is still, like, for all intents and purposes to the deer world, clean, then you're fine with hunting that same set multiple times, as long as all the conditions are kind of lining up for you.
Yep. And yeah, I think a couple days is okay. 3 days is pushing it. Every time you go in the woods, you're going to leave scent. Every time you go in the woods. Mm-hmm. You know, so I think you can get away with a couple days, maybe 3. But then if you're wanting to hunt anymore, you should probably stay out there for a couple weeks, right, just to, you know, let everything settle down, let all your scent go away. And then you may be able to hunt it 1 or 2 more days. So 5 days, 6 days in one stand throughout the season is pushing it for me.
Right. Okay. What I know you'd mentioned earlier when we were talking about wind that you're pretty diligent about your scent control. I'm just curious. I'm always interested to see what different people are doing. So what's your? I guess let me put it this way. I'm always interested to see how neurotic people are about their scent control. So I'm interested to hear what you do, what your regimen is.
I am not crazy about it. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm crazy about it, but third week of October, all my street clothes will be washed in scent-free detergent. I only shower in scent-free soap. I only wear scent-free deodorant. My truck's scent-free. The back of my truck, I keep all my clothes. I have a cap on my truck. Mm-hmm. I just keep all my clothes in that. I don't use totes. I just keep all my clothes in there. But I wash my clothes about every 2 times that I go hunting.
Right.
So if I hunt, 2 sits, by the 3rd or 4th sit, I'm definitely gonna be washing my clothes.
Right.
I use some scent spray, some scent killer spray. Dead downwind's what I use mostly. Not plugging dead downwind by any means, but that's what I use mostly.
Right.
Other than that, ozonics, I know all that stuff works. I just, I don't think it's going to work enough. Right. So I just don't mess with it.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. I think that I probably have become less and less concerned. I mean, I still practice a pretty healthy scent regimen, kind of do a lot of the similar stuff that you just talked about. My stuff actually usually stays in a tote until I'm going to wear it. I basically strip naked on the back of my truck and change before I walk into the woods, and I do the same thing when I come out and put on my clothes. Street clothes are washed just like you had mentioned, descended showers, all those types of things. But I don't think as nearly as neurotic as I was about it a handful of years ago. John, do you kind of follow a similar suit? I actually never even asked you what your scent regimen was, I don't think, in the past.
Yeah, mine's real similar to Donnie's. Big believer in the scent-free showers, and I even take my towel, and I'll have a couple of pairs of pants and a couple of shirts that I'm going to be wearing, like Donnie said, street clothes, and I'll throw a towel in there and scent-free wash that as well and keep that separate. But one thing, I used to be a big ozone guy in the tree, and if your thermals aren't right, and you get those weird mornings where the thermals just, everything's settling on the bottom at the base of the tree. And I've had some situations with the ozonics that I just had this huge concentration of ozone at the base of the tree, and it was just in serious volume to the point that was actually spooking deer. And so I even went to the extreme last year that I didn't run the ozonics in the tree very much. I love treating my clothes with ozone. Even kind of like what Donnie was saying, if I hunt 2 days, I'm going to treat my clothes with ozone, and I've got a big bag, and I'll hang everything up in it. I guess my biggest thing that I do differently than some people is I'm a big firm believer in if your clothes are getting a little sweaty. I mean, we're all notorious for taking our clothes off at the truck and then throwing them in a sealed box or a sealed bag or something so it's dark and they're damp. Mm-hmm. Well, when things are dark and damp, that's where bacteria grows. Bacteria is the smell. So I've got this little device. I forget what it's even called. I'm looking at Scent Master. I'm looking at it right now. It actually heats everything up to about 120 degrees and it circulates air through charcoal. And I think little things like that, it's noisy as all get out. I mean, it's like running a shop vac in the house, for about 2 hours. And my wife just loves the sound of that. But nonetheless, it's huge, man. Just warming your clothes up to where they dry out and circulating that air, I think, is the biggest thing.
Right. Interesting. And then, of course, I think, one of the things I started doing, I guess, this year is wearing merino wool bases to kind of help me with some of that, because I've not worn that in the past. So that's something I changed to this year. I'm suspecting you guys probably do something similar.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and last year I even started using some cedar cover spray. You can go round and around, and sure, you can eliminate some of your scent, and maybe you can mask some stuff, and maybe you can fool their nose with some of the products that are clogging the olfactory glands and things. But I think it's a whole lot. At the end of the day, I think it's easier to cover your smell than to get rid of your smell.
Interesting. Yeah, I used to use some things similar that was a cover scent. I was always concerned that it was too pungent, I guess. It was the thing that I was concerned about, but maybe I was just using too much of it. I've done the things in the past where I've taken leaves and kind of stuffed them in my box with my clothes and stuff like that. Let them sit in there with leaves and so forth. But yeah, I haven't used a cover scent in a little while. Maybe I should. Maybe that'll up my game a little bit. Who knows? All right. So one of the other questions, one thing I always kind of for me, I guess, just to change gears here, rut is of course the big prime time that everyone kind of targets and loves hunting that time of year. But I, oddly enough, actually really like late season. Is one of my favorite times of year. Do you have a favorite time of year, Donnie, that you prefer to hunt? And maybe it's rut. And if it is rut, is there a second time of year that you really prefer to hunt?
Obviously rut. I love pre-rut. Love pre-rut. Love post-rut. The rut itself, I think, overrated. Late season in Ohio with a corn pile and cold weather. If you want to kill a big deer, you can get it done. Yeah, that's I hate to keep going back to corn piles, but man, late season in Ohio, cold weather. We have a muzzleloader season. It's the second week of January. If it's cold and you have a big deer on the property, it's almost a slam dunk.
Really?
It's almost a slam dunk.
Nice. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I kind of started gravitating toward really liking late season. For one, on some of the private properties that I hunt in my hometown, most of the folks that don't hunt late season because the weather just kind of gets nasty and cold, and so they head for indoors. So I usually have the properties to myself for the most part. The deer are a little skittish, of course, because we just went through archery and rifle season here in Pennsylvania. But it's also, I find a nice kind of ridge. It's near a food source, and that area is usually kind of magic, kind of like what you're talking about. The deer are going to pile into that in the evening, and I kind of set myself up in a good pitch point or a good funnel right in front of that food source, and I'm gonna, at minimum, I'm gonna see deer. Whether or not the one that I'm after makes it through the year or not remains to be seen, but that's usually one of my favorite times to hunt as well. But I want to change gears here yet again here, because I had a question or two for you about this, and it was funny because right before we got on to talk, I saw a post that you put on Facebook of a video you made of, I believe it was your kind of a montage or a through the years kind of scenario of your daughter hunting, if I'm not mistaken. And I have a daughter, she's 9, and shoots a bow, and she's, pretty excited about, shooting her bow. And she's been asking when she gets to go to Montana with me to hunt and when she can go hunt deer with me and stuff like that. So I'm just curious, as maybe we'll turn this into a hunting parenting advice show now. What are some tips, I guess, from you to kind of keep her interested, to see if I can't continue to get her in the timber and put her in a stand one day with me as she gets older?
Gosh, man, obviously the number one thing is you got to put animals in front of them.
Right.
That's, if they get bored, that is death.
Yeah.
So what I did with my kids is started them turkey hunting, got them interested in hunting through turkey. You can always find turkeys. Turkeys are everywhere. So get them started turkey hunting and get them interested in hunting through that. And then slowly get them into some deer hunting and let them shoot a couple does, let them get interested in, just let them shoot whatever. And, then start holding out for a buck and any buck, they shoot at any buck, and then just start getting bigger and bigger. And now my daughters want to go with me every year. So
Nice.
just kind of take your time with it. Don't push them, and just make sure they're seeing animals. Make sure there's some action.
Right. So I feel like I didn't foul this up yet because I did start her with turkey hunting, and she's gone to the blind with me 2 years in a row now. We've not killed anything yet, but we've had birds coming in, so that was good. Last year we got rained out a couple times, which kind of fouled things up for us. And she wants to go every year, and I took her on a squirrel hunt last year in October. And for PA, we saw a nice PA shooter that day. I didn't have my bow with me because we were on a squirrel hunt. So that was the first time she'd seen like a rack buck in the woods. And she just thought it was the coolest thing. It was at like 20 yards, standing broadside of us. And she was really excited. And so she's been asking to go back out. So we've got a turkey hunt this year in the works, and we got some squirrel hunting this year in the works. Did you start her off when it came to deer? Did you go to gun, or did you start with a crossbow, or how did you make that transition?
I went to muzzleloader.
A muzzleloader, okay.
Yep. With the muzzleloader, I bought a youth muzzleloader, so it's real easy for her to handle. And I load it light. So I bought some 200 grain slugs, and then I only shoot 80 grains of powder, so that it's a real light load, but it gets it done. Most of the deer we're shooting are within 50 yards, so it's plenty of gun, and it doesn't have the recoil, so it's real easy for her to shoot. It's scoped. All she has to do is put the crosshairs on it. It was super simple for her, so I thought that was the way to go. Here in Ohio, we're only allowed shotgun or muzzleloader if you went out with a muzzleloader. Right. So I felt I could have went, maybe 20 gauge slug gun. I just liked the idea of having the muzzleloader. I thought that kind of added some interest to it. Like, let her shoot it, let her see the smoke. Just a little bit more enjoyment, and it was definitely good enough to take an animal with.
Right. Nice. Yeah, that might have to be something I investigate. I actually have never, truth be told, I've never muzzleloader hunted in my life, I don't think. So maybe that's a way.
And it's fun. It's kind of addicting.
What's that?
It's fun. It's kind of addicting.
Yeah, as you're mentioning it, like the smoke and the whole thing, it's like I think I would enjoy that almost as much as she would. But she is a pretty good shot, man. She's got a little 410 shotgun that she put a turkey in front of her this year. I think she'll do okay with it. She was shooting the turkey target pretty well. She was plastering him. So I have confidence that she's probably actually a better shot with a shotgun than I am, to be quite honest. But I know we've kept you here for about an hour, Donnie, and I want to be sensitive to your time. So I'll ask you one more question, and we'll let you kind of get going with your evening. I'm sure you got some work to do tomorrow morning, but I always like to kind of ask the folks that come on the show to take us on a hunt with them, and if you wouldn't mind, take us on a memorable hunt that you had, and tell us, what state you're hunting, what time of year it is. It can be one where it was a close encounter. It could be one where you killed a great buck or not. But give us every detail from the truck back to the tailgate, if you wouldn't mind.
We'll go to 2012, 200-inch non-typical on public land. So I hunted the night before on private property on a farm in Vinton County. It's a family farm. Really windy. I came down out of the tree early. Stormed all night. I was in a camper all night. Got up the next morning. Got up kind of late. Hiked in, mile and a half. I'd already picked a spot. I'd already been in there for years. Picked a spot on the map. Hiked in. By the time I got to the tree, it was getting daylight. I used a climber. I always use a climber on state land. So I attach my climber and climb up. I get everything situated. And a lot of times when I'm on state land like that, or using a climber in general, I'll kind of tickle a rattle bag or whatever I'm using for rattling, maybe rattling horns. That morning I had a rattle bag. So I kind of tickle that around a little bit, not get crazy, just kind of cover up noise from me climbing up the tree. So I do that, and I throw that back in my backpack. I sit down. I start texting my wife to tell her, everything's good. I'm in my stand. And as I'm texting her, I look up, and within 70 yards. He's walking straight towards me. Put my phone away, grab my bow, hook up. He's 30 yards. He takes, 10 more steps. I grunt at him, stop him, and shoot him. And when I shot him, I thought he was, a gray deer. I thought he was going to be 160, 170, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. Typical. So, shoot him. He goes down. He goes over 50 yards. He lays there for a little bit. I'm watching him. Finally, he expires. So I climb down. I go over. And he has 24 points. He's a typical 10-point frame, but he had all these other points around his bases, and all those points added up 34 inches of non-typical. So I call my dad and tell my dad, my dad's always the first guy I call to tell him to kill a big one. Call him, and he says, "How many points is he?" And I said, "I don't know, Dad. I haven't counted." I start counting, and I get to 10, 11, 12. My dad says, "Damn, that's a good one, 12-pointer." I said, "Dad, that's on one side." So, Dad asked me, "You want me to come and help you?" And I say, "No." It's a 3-hour drive. I said, "I'll have him out before you get here." And the next thing you know, I have to drag him out that 1.5 miles. I attached him to my belt with my climbing harness and put my tree stand on my back with my backpack, grabbed my bow, and counted off 20 steps until I walked, 1.5 miles out with him.
20 steps at a time.
20 steps at a time.
Man, that's awesome. So what did you think, man? Like so this was your second one, right? Second 200-inch?
Yep.
So after you killed your first one, did you think that you would ever shoot another 200-inch deer?
No.
So what was running through your head at that moment when you were thinking, like, did you realize when you walked up on him and you saw there was 24 points and you saw the size, at that point, did you think, okay, this guy might be another 200?
No, I thought this deer may go 180, maybe 185. With all these little points and all this stuff, this deer may go 180, 185. And I got him home, got him skinned out, and I put a tape on him. And the first time I put a tape on him, I came up with 202 and some change. Mm-hmm. And I went over the numbers, and I thought, man, I had to have done something wrong. This can't be right. So I did it again and came up with 202 and some change. And I came in and told my wife, I think I just killed another 200-inch deer. Like, it was just crazy. Like, he's a good deer. Obviously, he scores really well.
Right.
I mean, I think he nets 198 even.
Right.
He was a good deer, but my typical is just a huge frame compared to this deer.
Right.
Like, if you look at the two deer on the wall, you would never guess that both deer score 204. Right. You would never guess it.
Wow.
And it's just amazing that the way the deer, non-typicals and typicals scored, it's amazing how much difference there can be in two exactly the same scored deer.
Right. And that second deer puts you in some rarefied air, right? If I'm not mistaken, as far as like the number of folks who have killed multiple 200-inch deer, correct?
Yeah, I've heard that, and I don't know, exact numbers and all that. I don't know.
Yeah,
I've heard that.
Yeah. I was looking online or something like that, and there was a handful of guys that had killed multiples. And I think I heard something. I want to say it might have been Don Higgins, if I'm not mistaken, was talking about trying to, I think, take his third or fourth or whatever it was, because it would be a small number of folks who have ever done that. Man, I tell you what, I would probably be shaking so bad if I saw a 200-inch deer that I wouldn't be able to hit it. So I don't know that I'll ever be part of that club, but it's always nice to dream. I can live vicariously through you, at least through one of yours. That's the way.
I think you'd be surprised. Like, once you've killed some deer, then you kind of just go into go mode, shooter mode.
Right.
If you don't pay attention, if you don't get caught up in all that size, and you just go into shooter mode, like the typical I killed, I didn't think he was 200 inches. I knew he was big.
Right.
I mean, he was obviously big.
Right.
But I didn't, add him up. I think that's the worst thing to do is start adding up. When you're in your tree stand, you're looking at a deer, start adding up what you think he scores. I think there just needs to be a switch in your brain that says, I'm shooting or I'm not shooting. Right. He's big enough, not big enough. And once you start doing that, then I won't say they're easy to kill, because they're never easy to kill. Right. But I don't think you get so uptight about it.
Right. Well, I'm gonna hope that one day I get to shoot you a text or shoot you a message and let you know how I fared whenever I saw a monster. I'll hope that day happens.
Yeah, heck yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
Right. But hey, man, I do appreciate you jumping on. I want to be sensitive to your time. Thanks for coming on and sharing all that information. Thanks for the great story. And I'll look forward to kind of following along with you during this year, seeing all your hunting excursions, and then, of course, watching your kids get into the timber with you. But before I let you go, is there anything, places where people could find more information about you, the outfitter that you're guiding for, or, any Instagram page or anything like that?
Instagram's DWilson204, realmccoyoutdoors.com is the outfitter I work for.
Yeah, and all the folks out there listening, be sure to give Donnie a follow. It's awesome photography work. Tells really good stories with the lens. And it's always fun to kind of follow along with you during your family excursions and watch how your family enjoys the outdoors and the hunting heritage as well. So give him a follow. Donnie, thanks again for joining, and hope to talk to you soon. Good luck this year.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I want to thank Donnie for joining us. Be sure to head over to Donnie's Instagram and Facebook pages and give him a follow. Also, check out the Real McCoy Outdoors Facebook page and website if you're considering using an outfitter in the future. I'll place all the links for both of these in the blog post show notes. Most importantly, I want to give all of you a big thank you for tuning in. Also want to wish all of you good luck as we're heading into the best part of deer season, the pre-rut and rut phases. So hope all of you have the type of season that we're hoping to have, and all your hard work in the off season pays dividends this time of year. Be sure to go to iTunes and hit the iTunes subscribe button so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes of this podcast, and follow along with us on the Truth from the Stand and Instagram and Facebook pages to keep up with what's happening in the Truth from the Stand world. And finally, need to give a big shout out to our partners that continue to help us make this podcast possible: Whitetail Institute of North America, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Lone Wolf Portable Tree Stands. And until next time, we'll see you.
It takes a special knowing to colorful damaged heads, broken letters, rationalize yourself in numbers, but I